Israel Keyes. I hope this video finds all of you happy and healthy and ready for restful sleep. Here we go. Israel Keyes was an American serial killer, bank robber, burglar, arsonist, kidnapper, and sex offender. He was a busy boy. He murdered at least 3 people and committed dozens of other crimes across the United States from the late 1990s to February of 2012. He would be arrested in March of that year. Evidence in his jail cell led the Federal Bureau of Investigation to suspect that Keyes murdered at least 11 people. Israel Keyes was born in Richmond, Utah on January 7th of 1978, the second of 10 children of Heidi and Jeff Keyes. His parents were members of the LDS Church from Torrance, California, and his father had been an LDS missionary in Germany. Keyes and his siblings were homeschooled until 1983, and after leaving the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Keyes' father moved the family to a remote plot of land north of Colville, Washington, in Stevens County, when Keyes was 5 years old. Isolated from society, the family lived in a one-room cabin without electricity or running water on Rocky Creek Road. In Colville, the family attended services at a church called The Ark, which subscribed to white supremacist Christian ideology. Keyes later described The Ark as an Amish-like environment. During this period of attending The Ark, the Keyes family befriended the neighboring family of Chevy Kehoe, who was later convicted for a 1996 triple murder. The family attended another church in Colville called the Christian Israel Covenant Church that taught British Israelism as doctrine, that miscegenation, that is a fucking mouthful, y'all, was abominable and deviant, and that Anglo-Saxons were to rule over the perceived inferior races. It also means that they did not believe that any races should ever mix when procreation was involved. They did not believe in any interracial dating, having children, getting married, none of that. Sounds like a real winner, yeah. For years, some of the Keyes' children were forced to sleep in a tent due to their cabin's small size and made to hunt their food, chop firewood, and work on local farms to support the family. They also stated that this particular church was very militia-like. As a hobby, Keyes hunted anything with a heartbeat. He freely admitted to skinning deer alive to his peers at the church. As a result, several guns from his neighbor's residence and was forced to apologize by his parents after they discovered the cache. Keyes would also sell stolen guns to local adults at 14 years old. Seriously. Good Lord. Around this time, Keyes' parents provided shelter to personal friends in the presence of their son and daughter and Keyes' sister. Keyes tied a cat to a tree with a parachute cord and gorged it with a .22 revolver. The cat then began circling the tree before crashing into it and vomiting. Keyes allegedly chuckled before noting that the boy, who later informed his father, had vomited in response to the incident. Yeah, I guess so. What a fucking creep. Keyes had an epiphany in which he felt that he was different from his peers, who ran away from him. Upon this realization, he kept his increasingly antisocial behavior to himself. In addition, Keyes' mother began to notice some troubling signs in Keyes during this period when he began tuning into various radio stations and different things. By his teenage years, Keyes had become a skilled carpenter, building his first wooden cabin for his family at age 16. He also worked for a Colville contractor from 1995 to 1997. Around this time, Keyes kept a journal including biblical quotations documenting daily sins for which he felt shame, such as lusting after his girlfriend. Later, the family relocated to Smyrna, Maine, where they collected sap for maple syrup production in a mostly Amish community. Due to their mother's religious zealousness, the Keyes children were forced to hide from their parents to watch movies with friends and were forbidden to learn musical instruments. Sometime during this period, Keyes renounced his Christian faith. Keyes declared his atheism to his parents, both of whom he had previously made tireless and constant efforts to please. After an intense argument, this led them to evict him for blasphemy. They then instructed his younger siblings, who looked up to Keyes, to never have contact with him again. spending some time abroad. While stationed in Sinai, Egypt, Keyes befriended several soldiers, informing one of them that he would like to kill him. While at Fort Lewis, Keyes served on a mortar team. Former Army friends of Keyes have noted his quiet demeanor and habit of keeping to himself. On weekends, he was reported to drink heavily, consuming entire bottles of his favorite drink, Wild Turkey Bourbon. In February of 2001, Keyes was arrested in Thurston County for driving under the influence. Pursuant to a plea agreement, he was fined $350. Pardon my cat who is causing a ruckus. Keyes was also a fan of the hip-hop duo Insane Clown Posse and displayed posters of the musical act in the barracks. Keyes was awarded an Army Achievement Medal for his service as a gunner and assistant gunner from December of 1998 to July of 2001. He was then honorably discharged and relocated to Nia Bay, Washington. He lived in the Makah Reservation community of Nia Bay on the Olympic Peninsula with his Native American girlfriend, who he had met online and subsequently had a daughter with. In 2007, Keyes started a construction business in Alaska called Keyes Construction while working as a handyman, contractor, and construction worker. Keyes also had ties to New York. He owned 10 acres and a dilapidated cabin in the town of Constable. Sorry guys, I think one of my cats was making a noise. Keyes targeted random people all across the United States to avoid detection, planning for months before he committed a particular crime. He specifically frequented campgrounds and isolated locations. He claimed to only use guns when he had to and preferred strangulation. This was due to the pleasure he derived from witnessing victims lose consciousness in the struggle. He claimed to not kill children or parents of children primarily because of his daughter, whom he feared finding out about him and his crimes. However, police and FBI investigators were skeptical of this claim and suspected Keyes of killing several teenagers and children. Keyes did not admit to any murders during his 3 years in the United States Army, removed Cohen's body from the shed, applied makeup to the corpse's face, sewed her eyes open with fishing line. He took a picture of a 4-day-old issue of the Anchorage Daily News alongside her body, posed to appear that she was still alive. After demanding $30,000 in ransom, some of which was paid into Cohen's bank account, Keyes dismembered her body and disposed of it in the Matanuska Lake north of Anchorage. Her remains were recovered by the FBI's underwater search and evidence response team. Keyes hinted at other murders and/or was a suspect in other murders that coincided with his whereabouts or matched his modus operandi. However, he was not definitively linked to these crimes, and some of the victim identities are uncertain. Julie Marie Harris, a 13-year-old Special Olympics medalist in skiing, disappeared on March 2nd of 1996 while waiting for a ride to a local church in Colville, Washington. Her remains were found on April 26th of 1997 in a wooded area a few miles away. A cause of death was not determined. Harris was a double amputee. Her prosthetic feet were found by the Colville River a month after her disappearance. Keyes, then 18 years old, lived in the area at the time, and he was questioned about her case after he was arrested in 2012, but he neither confirmed nor denied killing her. Cassie Emerson, 12, another young girl from the Colville, Washington area, was reported missing after the remains of her mother, Marlene Emerson, were discovered in their burned-out trailer home on June 27th of 1997. Cassie's remains were found in 1998, about 13 miles from her home. Keyes did admit his first act of arson was with a trailer in Colville. Keyes admitted to investigators he had killed 5 people in Washington state and was the subject of an active investigation by the state police and the FBI. Keyes claimed to have his family and being labeled a copycat for his admiration of Bundy and other murderers. Keyes called Dennis Rader a wimp for apologizing in court and showing remorse for his crimes, but expressed admiration for the serial killers that haven't been caught. When asked in an interview about Alaska-based murderer Robert Hansen, Keyes replied enthusiastically, stating, "Yeah, I know all about him." He continued, "I probably know every single serial killer that's ever been written about. It's kind of a hobby of mine." When FBI agents informed him of the 2012 Aurora, Colorado shooting, he inquired as to the status of the shooter and had expressed mild interest in the perpetrator, James Holmes. After Cohen's murder, Keyes demanded ransom money, and police were able to track withdrawals from her account as he moved throughout the southwestern U.S. During that time, the police controversially refused to release surveillance video of her abduction. Keyes was arrested by Texas Highway Patrol Corporal Brian Henry and Texas Ranger Stephen Rayburn in the parking lot of the Cotton Patch Cafe in Lufkin, Texas, on the morning of March 13th, 2012. Investigators had circulated a lookout bulletin for the suspect's car, which had been used at ATMs to withdraw money from Cohen's account. The officers stopped Keyes after he drove slightly over the speed limit and searched his vehicle after they noticed cash stained with bright ink, indicating a die pack from a bank robbery. Cohen's ATM card and cell phone were also discovered in Keyes' car. Keyes was subsequently extradited to Alaska, where he confessed to the killing. He was represented by Rich Kurtner, federal public defender for Alaska. Keyes was indicted, and his trial was scheduled to begin in March of 2013. While incarcerated, Keyes spoke to investigators several times over a period of months. At first, he cooperated to an extent, confessing to some of his crimes, and stated a wish to be executed within the year. Keyes said he wanted to avoid publicity due to the negative attention his young daughter might face, but largely stopped cooperating after his identity was discussed in the media. On Wednesday, May 23rd of 2012, Keyes attempted to escape during a routine hearing, using wood shavings from a pencil to pick his cuffs. U.S. Marshals used a taser to subdue him. While being held in jail at the Anchorage Correctional Complex, Keyes managed to conceal a razor blade in his cell. It is uncertain how Keyes obtained the blade, as he was under security restrictions of using an electric razor under supervision. He died by suicide on December 2nd of 2012 by cutting his wrists and attempted strangulation. A suicide note found under his body consisted of an ode to murder, but offered no clues about other possible victims. In 2020, the FBI released the drawings of 11 skulls and one pentagram, which had been drawn in blood and found underneath Keyes' bed after his suicide. One of the drawings included the phrase, scholars, were